About a year ago, I was introduced to True Niagen, a supplement specifically designed to boost a key cellular resource called NAD. That's short for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. And I was really impressed with the research that showed that increased NAD levels can promote cellular repair, maintain healthy mitochondria, and increase energy throughout the trillions of cells in our body. I've been taking True Niagen ever since, and I am truly persuaded, which is why I'm so excited to welcome them back to the program. Let's get into how True Niagen works. From age 40 to 60, humans can experience a 50% decline in NAD, leaving our cells with a shortage of that incredibly valuable energy resource. Additionally, things like immune stress, poor diet, even alcohol consumption can all deplete our cell NAD levels. Research suggests that increased NAD can support cellular defense against these physiological stressors. True Niagen is designed to boost NAD levels and is backed by clinical research and regulatory approvals. Now, while the research is still evolving, I am truly impressed by the possibilities surrounding NAD and the research behind True Niagen. And I suggest you check out their information for yourself. To learn more about the research, science, and to order your supply of True Niagen supplement, visit drdrew.com/TrueNiagen and use the code DREW at checkout for a special discount on orders of 3 bottles or more. So that's my website, drdrew.com/TRUNIAGEN, and use the code DREW today. About a year ago, I was introduced to True Niagen, a supplement specifically designed to boost a key.
Hey, everyone. Sorry I didn't have it queued up. It's a dose of Dr. Drew.
Here we are, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm just getting on the chat right now with everyone. My guest today is the great Tyrus and attorney Anahita Sedghatfar. Susan's Anahita's upset she can't see us. Can you make
I see a beautiful picture, and I see Tyrus.
Is that me?
Yeah. You can put you in there, Susan. That'll be all right.
Yeah, okay. I'll work on it.
Okay, good.
Okay.
So, Tyrus, welcome back, buddy.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Doc. Excited to be here.
And I'll tell you, one of the things we did, the reason, aside from the fact we love seeing Anahita and working with her, but you had a little exchange with Dana Perino regarding qualified immunity. So I called my friend Anahita and said, can you come in and dig into this a bit with us? Right, Tyrus?
Yeah. You know what's crazy is I don't want to say, like, when Dr. Drew, you told me not to do it, you said it was going to be, what was the word you used for kitties cover your head? A shitstorm if I did it. They were going to attack me. I could not help but notice after our Friday of when I hit him with the quality immunity thing, everybody started talking about it on other networks. It suddenly has become the hot word. It's super positive. I get 0 credit and I don't need it. But I just thought it was funny that when you said it, there was a tree of woe being built in the middle of the United States for you to be crucified on.
Yep.
And when I brought it up, they were like, hey, you know what? That's qualified immunity. Why not? Yeah, sure. Let's talk about that.
That wrestler dude is bringing it up. This must be something.
I even hit him with a date when it was open. Dana Perino's never been speechless. She literally was. If you can see me, she was like this.
Well, the reason I brought it up to you and you grabbed onto it was that whenever and Anahita, this is back to the HLN days, whenever we would get into discussions with people saying there's no justice, we'd always drill into that and go, what do you mean? I mean, these people were arrested, there was due process. But what they didn't know, that hidden in the due process, was this thing called qualified immunity that created a distance between what they imagined would be justice and what happened to some of these cases.
That's true.
Okay? So tell us what's in qualified immunity, how that works.
A lot of confusion about qualified immunity. So first and foremost, qualified immunity does not apply in criminal cases. So it doesn't apply when a police officer is being criminally charged. I know some people were thinking that it does. It doesn't. It only applies in civil lawsuits when a police officer is being individually sued in a civil case for monetary damages, okay? And what the doctrine holds is that unless the plaintiff suing the police officer can show that that officer violated a clearly established law, he can't proceed with a civil lawsuit. And as it turns out, that is an extremely high burden of proof to meet. And that's why we see so many ridiculous results because of this doctrine.
So you would hold on. Mm-hmm. The clearly established law, meaning unless there's some other criminal behavior.
No, so it's not criminal. We're talking about strictly civil, which is when you sue somebody for monetary damages.
No,
So
I
we
get
have
that.
criminal.
I get that. But
Right.
the violation of a law sounds criminal.
Right. Okay. And so I'll be a little bit more clear on what that means. And what that means is that you would have to show as a plaintiff that there is something that we call precedent in that particular jurisdiction that you're in with nearly identical facts in order to allow that lawsuit to move forward. So let me give you an example. George Floyd, if his family wants to now civilly sue those police officers, they're going to have to find some type of case, some type of precedent that shows nearly identical facts, an officer kneeling on an unarmed man's neck for close to 8 or 9 minutes, where that man is screaming, I can't breathe, and that man dies. And so what we've seen in a lot of these cases, as the courts have interpreted this doctrine, it's led to results where courts will say, look, the conduct was clearly egregious. It was even possibly unconstitutional. But because there's no established precedent with these identical facts in this particular jurisdiction, that officer is not going to be held accountable
So
civilly.
that's insane. That's pretty much
Yeah,
insane, right?
yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, I have a question.
Sure.
So, for the purposes of just argument, one of the issues that I think with qualified immunity with elected officials, for example, since we're in Minnesota, we'll stay in Minnesota.
Mhm.
The mayor decided to call the police out and said, we're going to not go into that area where there was rioting and looting going on and businesses were burned and people were hurt, et cetera, et cetera. There has to be, because even reading what the law was, it said frivolous. And I feel that there needs to be, if it's not quality immunity, then it needs to be something. But
Right.
he should be held accountable because of his decision and the acts of the businesses that were burned down and the people that were injured, or in some cases, in some parts of the country, even killed at some point. There should be a responsibility there for elected officials, because I think their decisions would not always be based on party. They would have to put principle in. They wouldn't say it's good for the Democratic Party, or this isn't a right thing or a left thing.
Yeah.
You can make that argument where the Florida governor is going all in about making sure everyone's back up, lifting all the rules of coronavirus, knowing but the numbers are seeping up. You can make the same argument. He's putting party or profit in front of people. There has to be a way that you can show the difference between frivolous and what is basically just complete incompetence.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And frankly, you guys, I was so disappointed that the Supreme Court decided a couple days ago not to take up the qualified immunity cases, because when you have someone like Justice Clarence Thomas, arguably one of the most conservative justices that we've had, when he's even coming out and saying that this doctrine needs to be scaled back or eliminated or at least re-examined, I think that speaks volumes. And I've handled these civil rights cases, and I can tell you how unjust the results can be. There has to be some type of liability. You can't have any type of public trust in any of our institutions, including politicians, including police officers, if there is not that level of accountability.
I started getting into this 2 years ago. I think when you were on my radio show, Anahita, I was talking about
malpractice
this, right?
Cases. Yep.
Yeah, I was saying,
Yes.
Look, as a physician, when I make decisions, I have malpractice issues, I have legal issues, and I'm held accountable if I make a mistake. But politicians can do whatever the F they want, and they're not held accountable in any way. And what I was talking about at the time was the fact that 3 people were dying on the streets of Los Angeles every day from homelessness. Rats were overrunning our city, and people were dying of typhus. And literally the politicians were like playing their violin while the city burned, and they're doing more of the same now. It's still going on right this minute.
It's about accountability. And I think Tyrus made a great point. He used the word frivolous, and that has been the term that has been used to sort of explain the public policy behind qualified immunity. Because the idea is, look, we police officers, politicians, people that are in a public capacity, we have to give them some leeway in order to do their job efficiently while avoiding frivolous lawsuits, while avoiding the floodgates of litigation sort of opening up every time something goes wrong. And I get that. But again, you guys have both given perfect examples of how the way this doctrine is actually applied doesn't even lead to that result at the end of the day. And so there is no accountability, and there is no sense of trust in our public institutions. And we're seeing it. We're seeing, I mean, these protests have gone on for what, almost 3 weeks now? People are sick and tired. And at some point, things need to change. And I think it's really time for a reckoning. And so we do have to deal with not only the police brutality, not only the criminal aspect, but also the civil aspect. When you're not holding these officers accountable, then it's kind of like, look, you know, there's no consequences to my bad actions. So I think it's important to make sure that there is accountability. And one of those things is getting rid of this qualified immunity doctrine.
Or at least scaling it back, as you said.
Or
Do you
at
guys
least
know,
scaling it back.
is the legislation that's being proposed, I know it's directed
Yeah.
at police, but is it also scaling back qualified immunity for public office holders? Do we know?
I saw it only with respect to what's going on with police officers. I think that's what the
Of
pressing
course.
issue is now, of course.
Of course.
But yeah, but eventually, I mean, again, everything is sort of based in our system on precedent. So once, hopefully, if we resolve qualified immunity, scale it back, abolish it in this context, then that gives courts the ability to now look at these cases in other contexts when you're dealing with politicians and other publicly elected officials, and also use the same rationale for those cases.
And Tyrus, I saw a tweet from your boyfriend, Leo Terrell, who said he's concerned, this is a different topic,
Huh? Say what?
Tyrus, really?
I met him-
Did I miss something?
he was my
I did
boyfriend
too.
before he was Tyrus's, so please.
And he was mine too, from the Fox days.
Well,
He was all of our boyfriends.
He gets around.
Wow, this guy gets around. Boy, you might have to sit him down, dog.
So
talk to him.
he tweeted that he's concerned that the Atlanta DA may have overcharged the officer in the Atlanta shooting. Do either of you have an opinion about that?
If I can go back for just a one second, because was still on the, before we get into that.
Sure.
I just think it aggravates me where everything is dumped on the police. Yeah, the bad apples is a stupid political word.
Mhm.
Corrupt police officers who do bad things have no place in the force, but neither do police chiefs and politicians who allow them to work there, who don't run their house, who don't keep their locker rooms clean. And it's not just guys who are doing police brutality. There's guys who are selling drugs. There's guys who are taking money. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Bad apples are doing, but all that reflects upon the police chiefs, the mayor. They're not doing their jobs. They're I had dinner with a sheriff, Sheriff Randy here in Mandeville last week at dinner, and we talked about a lot of stuff. And one of the things that we talked about was when a bad police officer is fired and he goes to another precinct. In some cases, maybe just jumps from police to sheriff in the same damn town.
Yeah.
Right.
And the officials will be like, yeah, well, he was let go for this reason. And they'll even call over to ask about him because it's literally that close of a situation. And the guys are like, no, we let him go for these reasons. And we don't think he's got what it takes to be a good police officer. And they're like, well, you hired 2 of our guys last year, so we're going to take them. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
That's the mindset with someone in leadership. Then that guy goes on the job. He does something to someone. He is arrested, charged, and everyone attacks him. But the guy who hired him, the guy who allowed him to work, just goes on and keep on hiring. And that's the problem. And that's where the bad police officers should have qualified immunity. No, it needs to stop a little higher in the food chain. Don't quit dumping on the guys with feet on the ground and start dealing with the guys who are making these hiring decisions. But
there's a reality here too that's going to be worse going forward, which is who's going to want to become a cop. And let's remind ourselves that every little GD town in this country has to field a team, and it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. So I'm not surprised this kind of thing happens.
Well, it
the
makes
Atlanta
sense.
thing.
What? Oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead. I just
Yeah,
talked. Please.
I was
Sorry.
just going to say what Tyra said makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you look at sort of vicarious liability and holding people accountable, going up the chain of command, you see that in other areas of the law. For example, if you're working for a company and your coworker or your supervisor is harassing you, ultimately the owner is liable, the supervisor's supervisor is liable. So there has to be some type of accountability. And I think that not seeing it in this context, and this is a judicially created doctrine, by the way, which is why I think Clarence Thomas is sort of opposed to it, or at least wanted to take up some of these cases. So really, this is the only area where we don't see that sort of vicarious liability going up to the decision makers and the people that actually are in charge of the bad seeds and the bad actors.
Well, we all kind of agree that something needs to show that at least this is scaled back in some way, and I think we're all in agreement about that. Now I'm going to go back to the question about the Atlanta
Yeah.
officer.
Okay. Now I'm ready. Now I'm ready for it. I just had to
just
get
read
that.
up on it.
What do you say?
No, I'm
both of
doodling.
you.
I'm a doodler.
Oh, okay.
I draw while I wait.
I like it.
I originally saw it. I was like, the police officers were in a bad situation. This guy, I don't care how pleasant he was, and all the stuff is going on. A fight broke out. When you fight with the police, bad things are going to happen. And he got one of their weapons away from him. When he fired the taser gun at the police officer, although he missed or he shot up or whatever, and the police officer discharged his firearm, I still hate the fact that he was shot in the back. And I think, if in a given situation, you would just let him call in more officers, and it's not going to go too far. You got his license, you got his car, but I still didn't feel like it was racially motivated or a hate crime or, police brutality, seeing that he was the aggressor until I saw him standing over him, until he kicked him, until he said, got him, until he let him bleed for 2 minutes without providing first aid.
Yeah, I think that goes to show state of mind, right?
Yeah. And that's why he was charged with felony murder. I don't think up until that point, I don't think there was anybody who could not make an argument, because everyone who's sitting at home telling somebody what they should have done, a police officer, what they should have done in the heat of the moment, with a guy who physically was overpowered two officers, took their stun gun from them, shot it back at them. So who's to say if he would have hit him with that stun gun, he would have then took his piece?
Yeah.
We don't know. And that officer doesn't know. So up until that point, you can make an argument that this is not a situation of police brutality. This is a bad situation, and a cop made a split-second decision based on the actions of the guy who was attacking police officer or whatever. But the ending of it, now all of that kind of goes out the window.
And the beginning too, by the way. The guy seemed so reasonable and appropriate before he made a bolt.
But he also had 4 warrants.
That's why he bolted.
Yeah, so you're always cool before, like his state. Like I said, he's playing back. He's cool. They're talking to him, and he's going to go to jail because he failed his test, and then he decided he was going to fight for it. At that point, rationalization or how nice he was in the beginning means absolute zero. Once you take a swing at a cop, I don't care if we're talking about weddings and showing pictures of our kids, and we're going to have dinner together at the VA next week. As soon as I punch him, it's out the window, So just how he was before then. Honestly, he did a really good job of catching him off guard. He got them to relax. They tried to casually, arrest him, and he got the jump on him.
I don't think it's going to be as easy to prove this case as in the George Floyd case. I think you do have a situation where everything happened in a much more compressed time period. But I think definitely this could have been avoided. I think it comes down to training. There could have been a million other things those officers could have done other than shooting him in the back. And again, I don't know what was in the minds of these officers, but I don't think we can at this point discount that it was not racially motivated. I mean, I think we've seen now, thank God for cell phone cameras, thank God for police body cams, which, by the way, I think should be mandatory in all departments. I've been saying that for years. We're finally seeing what has been going on from time immemorial to people of color, to African Americans. And we've seen time and time again that race is absolutely a motivating factor. I mean, Dr. Drew, I've devoted most of my career representing victims whose civil rights have been violated. And for years, I have seen firsthand the role that race plays in our criminal justice system. African Americans and minorities, they get treated disproportionately at every level of our criminal justice system. And yes, it starts with police officers. It starts with that initial arrest. It continues on to the charges that are filed, to the convictions, to the sentencings, and yes, to the killing, the unjustifiable murders of people of color. And so it's time for a reckoning. I think people are sick and tired. And we've even covered on your HLN show numerous cases where the police officers falsify records or they lie, they cover each other's backs until the body cam footage gets released. And then boom, you find out that they were lying. So, I think it's time. It's really time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And it wasn't, you could make the argument that it wasn't racially motivated till the end when it was 100% him standing over him, watching him bleed out.
Yeah.
Standing on him, but standing over him.
Well, speaking of standing on, and by the way, Tyrus, your buddy Kat is blowing up my phone telling me to tell Tyrus hi. So there's that.
What? Oh, the envy. It's all this time I'm getting with Dr. Drew. It's driving her crazy. Would you text back that jealousy does not look good on you?
Okay.
You can't have it all. You can't have it all.
You're jealous. Doesn't look good. I'm sure this is very interesting. Susan, get on the camera so you can help me here.
Do doctors text as bad as their handwriting?
Oh, yeah. I use one finger to
One
text
thumb.
with, and I can't. Yeah. There's Susan. Hi, Susan.
Hi.
In the corner.
I've got these big clunky headphones on. I don't like them. I mean, I love these headphones.
As we were saying about leaning on someone, apparently there is another case out there, a white guy that was on drugs who officers sat on for like 12 minutes on his chest, and he died. And that is a further evidence to what I've been saying since the beginning, that if you want to get something with fentanyl on board not to breathe, you don't hit their neck, you hit their chest. You put pressure on the chest, the diaphragm won't drive. And this is kind of an interesting wrinkle in the George Floyd case. The guy that actually killed him may have been the guy in his chest, not the guy in his neck.
Yeah, the back. There are two officers in the back. I mentioned that because I know from bodyguard days of bouncing clubs when we had to restrain guys until the sheriff came to take them away. One of the things you do is you'd put knees on the small of their back and they can't breathe and they would chill out real quick. So even though the neck, I just think it was a combination. Again, I'm not a doctor, but you are. I think it was a combination of all the body weight.
Listen,
causes. That doesn't take away the murderous nature of what that man did and had literally no problem. He didn't even blink. But I think everybody who was there that day was a murderer.
Obviously, if you're causing restriction up here and you're doing something that prevents airflow from expansion here, it's a double whammy, right? I mean, it's two things.
But it does worry me, though. It does concern me. If one juror is confused, we have a problem. If one juror is like, well, there's two different autopsy reports. I don't know if he killed him. I didn't know if, and how could you premeditate murder if you both did it on the same there's a lot of things, because I don't like that murder charge. I do not like having to prove intent in that situation or premeditate. I don't like that, because that's a burden of proof you have. And there was more people. It wasn't just him and one cop who choked him out and he died. And so it's reasonable doubt.
Yeah, that's a causation argument, which I actually didn't even think of. The jurors are going to have to establish causation, or at least be convinced that this particular officer's actions caused the death of George Floyd. So I didn't even think about that. And you're right, it just takes one juror. And when you're talking about prosecuting police officers, we already know it's very difficult for officers to get charged, much less actually convicted, because jurors tend to give officers the benefit of the doubt. These are our protectors. These are good people. And it's interesting because one of the jury instructions that jurors receive in these officer cases is that the jurors are not to give more credibility to the officer's testimony than they would a layperson's testimony. So
but they always
it's hard. Yeah, but they always do. And if you poll jurors after some of these cases, a lot of them will say, but he's a police officer. I'm going to trust him. I'm going to trust that his intentions or her intentions were not to kill. They're to serve and to protect. And that's, again, kind of going back to why I think we really need to revisit this qualified immunity doctrine, is that because we don't get a lot of these convictions in the criminal courts, we have to have some outlet to allow these victims to get compensated or somehow some type of justice through the civil system. So it kind of leads back to that.
Do you think if they qualify, boy, it gets complicated, but I was just thinking if qualified immunity is in place and the criminal charges don't go through, do you think there'll be a civil case? And
it's going to be much harder, but the burden of proof in a civil case is much lower than it is in a criminal case. So in a criminal case, you have to prove to the jury beyond a reasonable doubt that the officer is guilty. In a civil case, the burden of proof is simply more likely than not. So it's only 51%.
So
and you don't need to have a
preponderance of evidence. The preponderance.
Exactly. Good job, Dr. Drew.
Yeah,
and you don't need to have a unanimous jury in a civil lawsuit, but you do in a criminal. So yes, it helps to get a criminal conviction in terms of trying to recover civilly, because then you can say, look, he was criminally found liable, but it doesn't negate the ability to recover in a civil lawsuit if you get beyond the darn qualified immunity doctrine, which, like I said, has turned into an absolute shield, which is not what it's supposed to do.
Let's say this legislation goes through. Is the fact that legislation came around after the crime of the killing of George Floyd, would qualified immunity not be a consideration in his case if there is a civil case?
You mean, will it be retroactive?
In other words, if let's say this legislation goes through and they pull back on qualified immunity, would it apply to George's case if they do?
It would depend on what the law says. If the law says this will be retroactive, or it'll apply to any case that happened between this month and this month. So it just really depends. Sometimes there's sunset provisions in the legislation, but they certainly could craft it that way to where it would be retroactive. And I hope that's what happens. But I mean, it's not looking very hopeful at this point. I was sort of waiting to see what happened on Monday with the Supreme Court. And when they decided not to hear, I think there were about 7 qualified immunity cases before the court. They took none of them up. So now we have to kind of wait and see what Congress does.
Well, and that is sort of their message when they don't do that, right? There should be a legislative action, not a judicial action. So that makes sense.
Although this was judicially created to begin with, which is what makes it that much more frustrating. This is not a doctrine that was a law. It was sort of a doctrine that was developed through the court systems.
Got it.
So they had the chance to do something and they didn't.
I talked to a judge about it. And he said it was a defense, essentially.
Yeah, it's a defense. It's essentially, it's a shield. It's saying, unless you can prove that in your jurisdiction, the same exact thing happened before, no matter how egregious, no matter how horrible, no matter how illegal, you can't sue an officer.
Let me talk about a completely different topic for a second. And by the way, to people in the chat on the restream, I have some really interesting COVID news I'm going to review at the end of our conversation. The New England Journal just came out with a publication. I put it on the restream, the actual headline, but they're zeroing in on the genetics of who gets respiratory failure, and it does have some implication on blood type. All this hooey about blood type that we've been saying, no. Now it's starting to look like there might be something going on there. But I want to
Why do I have a feeling it's mine?
What type?
It's always my blood type.
What type are you? And I'll tell you.
I don't even know mine.
I think I'm AB, something like that.
Well, AB is super special. The AB is the rarest, but it's A that has the problem apparently, type A, which is the second most common. So I want to ask a question about California. And Anahita, since we last did media together,
Yeah.
California has changed, it seems to me. And I want to give you guys both this sort of question. Because when I see this thing going on in the city of Los Angeles, where the mayor is now going to move a bunch of money over to mental health services without discussing it with the mental health delivery system, and making it look like we're going to be able to. I heard people literally saying on television last night, when we call 911, a social worker will be dispatched. I'm like, oh no, there will not be anything like that.
To emergency situations. I heard
Impossible.
that as well.
We are not going. When there's
That's the
violence,
foster care system about social workers.
we are in violence. We go with law enforcement. We do not go by ourselves. So yes, for sure, give a lot of money to the social services and to mental health services, and give us about 7 years to make a difference, and there will be less violence. Yes, there will be. It'll take about 6 or 7 years. But to say that it's going to supplant law enforcement is the most bizarre, distorted misadventure I've ever heard. And again, they're doing it without conversing with clinical people, which is just, again, the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. But anyway.
Well, it sounds good in theory, because we do know that a lot of these issues that arise on the streets or in crimes where people are hurt, shot, or beat up, there are mental health issues.
Yes.
And I think in theory, and you've talked about this for years,
Yes.
is that we need to figure out a way to get people, to mandate mentally ill people to get treatment.
Yes,
Right
ma'am.
now, obviously, we can't do that unless you meet, again, another high burden. They're a
That's
threat
right.
to themselves or to others. So I did hear that discussion, and I actually couldn't wait to hear your thoughts on it, because
Yeah.
I know how passionate you would be about that.
This is exactly the issue. The people that
Yeah.
really need the help won't take it. It'll take forever to change. Really, I like the idea of it, and I'm all for it. But to have it replace on a 911 call, impossible. Not even remotely a possibility. But anyway, the question I was going to ask was not about that. It made me it started me thinking when I saw that nonsense going on. I thought, wait a minute. In the state of California right now, you can live in the streets. You can steal up to $950. You can use drugs. You can disregard sanitation of any type. You can have massive rodent blooms. You can loot. You can destroy property. You can engage in certain violent acts, and it's whatever. It's California. The legislature, the leadership has no interest in seemingly running this government. Am I wrong, or is this utopia I'm living in? And now we're talking about eliminating the police altogether. But I mean, but nothing's a crime. What's going on in this state?
Yeah, that's
Tyrus,
wow.
please.
That's not the California I grew up in. Every time I stepped in the liquor store, somebody was watching me. You buy, you go. That's all I ever heard. No one ever said to me, "Sir, $35 worth of merchandise in you. You're good." And I didn't steal anything. The idea, just I'm trying to think what that would be like. Who is it? Social worker. Is everything okay in there? Yeah. Okay. I mean, what are they gonna do? Remove me from the home?
Or what's the social? What's the 97-pound social worker gonna do? Knock the door down?
Yeah.
You can't make a rap song about dissing social workers. what rhymes?
Oh my God.
You know what I'm saying? You can't. I always forget if we can cuss on this or not. But man, I couldn't. What animal would you diss the social workers for? I guess you call them pigeons. They in everybody's business. I just what the hell, man? Like, no one wants the police until they need the police. But man, it just feels like this whole just kind of do what you want is kind of like giving up. It's basically saying that the average person is just going to do this anyway. So let's just let him do it. And that is a horrible message.
Isn't that
that's a horrible message.
Aren't these things, sanitation, living environments, criminal activities, crime, stealing, destroying property, assaulting people, isn't that the basic function of government? Isn't that their basic? Am I missing something?
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
You're right. And I think one of the things that I saw, we saw with Mayor Garcetti is that, I mean, are we supposed to make policies change based on pressure, based on fear, or is it supposed to be what's in the best of the community and what's in the best interest of society? And I think we're seeing, unfortunately, decisions being made that are either political or based on public pressure. And I think once we start going down that road, it's a huge problem. And when people are talking about, defunding the police, again, it sounds great in theory, but what does that exactly mean? What does defunding the police mean? I've heard, it means different things to different people. I don't know what you guys think about it, but you have some on one end of the spectrum that actually believe that they want to dismantle the policing system as we know it. Mm-hmm. And function in a society where we don't have police officers or limited police officers. Yeah. But what does that mean? What does that mean for schools and school shootings and the protection of society? So yeah. I just find it a little bit.
Well, they'll go. You know what they'll go. Well, you can have a SWAT team for the school shooting. You have a SWAT team.
No. Yeah, I don't think you can throw around that term too loosely. And unfortunately, I'm seeing a lot of that online, and I'm seeing a lot of people on television talking about it. It's one thing to say, look, let's, perhaps take some of the funding and divert it to social services. Let's put it back into the community. I can understand those discussions, but the notion of dismantling our policing system, I think, is just, it's a dangerous thing.
These are the same people that became experts in hydroxychloroquine 2 weeks after they learned how to pronounce the drug.
Right.
And now they're experts in social services, mental health delivery, and policing, and not asking for
and lawyering.
And lawyering too. Okay, good.
Yes.
So you're in the basket with us. Fantastic.
Yes. So,
Tyrus, what do you think?
Well, I was, thinking about because defunding the police means no matter how you try to spin it, and they try to spin it, but that means I'm taking money away from you for your training, your hiring, your programs, your departments, and I'm going to give it to somebody else. Okay, great. But that's not taking, you are then reducing what the police department can do to you, which then the police department will then have to prioritize what is important on a 911 call. They will no longer come out for domestic abuse calls because they don't have the manpower.
That's
right. The hours. So it would literally be, we come out for murder, severe assault, and terroristic threats.
And by the way, only after the fact. We're not going to prevent anything.
So while you're excited about doing it, and we showed them, you then, because there is a population who doesn't do bad things because the fear of going to jail. They don't do things because there's a squad car around. If those things are gone, you are going to open up a whole new population who is doing their best behavior to behave because they're cognitively aware of, hey, if I do this, I can get caught. Now they're saying, I might not necessarily get caught anymore. And you're going to look at the worst in people who now think they are free to do what they want. And we're going to see, and I hate using these terms, but you're going to see more rape. You're going to see more assault. You're going to see more cold-blooded murders. You're going to see, and they're going to be unsolved because the body's going to lay in the street. There's no team there to do the forensic stuff and find the trails that the killer left behind.
What about the social workers?
Yeah,
they're going to come out
the crime scenes.
Yeah. They'll be the target.
Right, they will be. But here's the deal. We were talking about earlier about every little community funding a police force. Restricting resources is going to make us have access to better police. You know what I mean? Now it's really going to be only people that we shouldn't be hiring, right?
We need to build up the police department. We need to protect the good cops that are out there that are trying to do their job. We need to increase their training. We need to make it to where a tired cop who's done 10 years but is staying on because he needs his pension can get the same type of, he can still get his pension and be like he's suffering from PTSD and like, thank you for your service. And he gets, you know what I'm saying? Like we need to look at ways to protect our police officers and to build them up, not tear them down and reduce them to the only ones who will take the jobs are guys with something to prove with a gun because there's no pay anymore and there's no protection. And they feel like every neighborhood they go into, they got a target on their back. You know, we're seeing police officers resign now. We're seeing groups that are like, no, we don't feel it's safe for us because we just become political. there's things that we can do. One, the biggest thing is, go back to it. If it's not doing something with qualified immunity, then we need to come up with a new law, a clause to where people in leadership who make decisions that affect the lives of others, who hire bad cops, who do shady things, are held accountable. But the problem is, we have to ask the ones who do the shady dealings and the backdoor dealings to make this a law. No politician's going to say, their first thing is, oh, that's a no thing. We don't, we won't protecting cops. They're not thinking about cops. They're worried about their own ass. They're worried about, well, if they get called, they could come to me and they could get me when I took money to make a decision and it affected the water in Flint. And, because I went the other way and they find out that I was criminally responsible. So we know we're not going to get anywhere with qualified immunity until we get a politician who really cares more about principle than party. And then just right now, it's sad. So we're just going to have to do a lot, whether everyone's dumping on the police, which then is going to affect everyday people. Because if the police don't want to go to work, there's going to be a lot of reasons why we're going to see that this was a mistake.
Well, I guess we're going to do a big experiment in Los Angeles. And
that's a lot of numbers in a hot summer. Summertime's the worst to not have police around, because you got a better shot waiting when it's cold. Like go somewhere like Wisconsin and an ice storm and tell the police take the week off. It's too cold to go out and act a fool. But when it's when you wearing a flannel shirt in the summertime, bad things happen. You hot. You start fighting and acting a fool. It's a bad time to decreasing the police environment when there's so many opportunists and so many groups that are going to take advantage of this. And we saw that. We had peaceful protests, and inside the protests, there was teams of looters and stuff, not just neighborhood kids being dumb, but people literally drove down to incite drama. So that's what we're looking at. We're seeing more of that. Then you'll start seeing gangs and militias and groups and, protecting neighborhoods and half-cocked people with shotguns and walking around like I'm this is our neighborhood. Like literally Mad Max beyond Thunderdome, except we don't have awesome Tina Turner singing for us. Like not going to be fun.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that.
Not going to be fun.
Thank you for that, painting that glorious picture of our
That's a great picture. Very vivid description.
Welcome to Dr. Drew's Thunderdome.
Thunderdome.
My two combatants, I will try to talk them out of it before they spin the wheel.
Well, you guys, we got to wrap this thing up. I'm going to do a few more minutes on COVID for the people.
So I wanted to show Anahita everybody.
Oh, what's that?
Oh.
Okay, so there's Drew.
Oh,
I guess
really?
I could have had you on there.
Oh,
You could
Oh,
have.
Technology.
I see everyone now.
Yeah. So.
Hey, my name's bigger than everyone else.
Yeah,
I know.
Awesome.
yeah. Well,
And then here's me. Hi.
and there's Susan in the
Susan,
picture
hi.
Sorry, I didn't say
Oh,
it like
but
that.
she's got her full name, so she wins. Never mind.
No, that was great. I like to do it, change it up
Turn
every
your
time.
face
Next
towards the
time
camera a little bit. It's a very weird angle.
I know
There
it
you
is.
go.
Well, it's not
Yeah,
great.
it's
But,
You got to bring
Always
the camera around.
judging. That's why you always get sent from network to network. Always picking on the production team. You gotta stop that, Doctor.
Oh no! On the contrary,
It's
this
the other way
you
around,
you
actually.
don't think I get notes from her every 3 times a day about makeup,
Yeah,
camera angles?
as she should. As she should.
I know.
I
Nobody else
love
would.
it.
It's just hard because the cameras don't reach certain areas, and I have to move everything around.
Get it together, Doc. Get it together.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. Well, listen, I appreciate you guys coming in. And Tyrus, we'll get you in here next Wednesday. We'll get a new topic going. And Anahita, thank you for your expertise and helping us.
Thank you very much. It was nice meeting you.
We couldn't
Nice
have done
meeting you,
this
Tyrus.
without
Yeah,
you.
thank
and,
you.
How are things looking? Just let me ask you, Anahita, how do things, you're here in LA. How do things look from your perspective, other than scary as far as COVID?
I mean, it's very scary. The courts are starting to open back up, but things have been sort of placed on hold. I've been working from home. Our office has been shut down, but just trying to be safe and slowly getting these cases active again so that we can fight for civil rights and beat this qualified immunity doctrine.
And now you're at Anahita Law, right?
I am AnahitaLaw.com or on Instagram, Anahita Seda, Seda.
All right, you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, guys.
All right, Dr. Drew.
Bye. Bye, Tyrus.
All right. Now we're going to do, I want to give you a few minutes on COVID here to wrap things up. So as I said, a New England Journal popped up just as we were on the air here. It is entitled, let me get it for you guys because it's really quite interesting. It's essentially, I'm surprised Andrew didn't jump at what I put on the restream because he's interested in this stuff. No. Genome-wide, here we go. And they've now identified a gene associated with respiratory failure. Genome-wide association study of severe COVID-19 with respiratory failure. The 3p21.31 gene cluster is a genetic susceptibility locus for patients with COVID to develop respiratory failure. It also involves the ABO blood group system, and I heard also that type A may be at a higher risk. So it's kind of interesting. They're zeroing in on some genetics here. I have not read this article. I'm going to bet that this also involves how we things like the metabolic syndrome, or risk for the metabolic syndrome. Let's see. I'm trying to see what they're looking at here. Yeah, I can't quite reading it quickly. Can't see what else is associated with that gene cluster. ABO groups have been implicated. Our genetic data confirm that group O is associated with a risk for acquiring COVID that was lower than that in non-O groups. Let's say that again. Our genetic data confirm blood O group is associated with a risk that is lower than other blood groups. So group O is at lower risk of acquiring the disease. Blood group A was associated with a higher risk than non-A group. So that's what I had heard. That must have been a precursor to this study coming out. I will continue to read the study a little more carefully, see if I can find any other information about what that gene cluster. The cluster is SLC6A20, LZTFLI, FL1, CCR9. That's interesting. CXCR6, XCR1. These are the genes now associated with complications of COVID. We kind of knew there would be a genetic story, right? I mean, we just knew that would happen. Just judging by the way people respond with the metabolic syndrome, that's a genetic cluster in itself, that those people do very poorly. So we'll get that going. Also, what you're hearing out there in the world about peaks and highest ever recordings in Texas and Florida and whatnot, I urge you to go on the University of Washington website. I had a long talk, well, not a long talk, an on-air talk with Dr. Charles Murray from University of Florida on my Fox 11 program last night. And I was asking him why you have this big uptick in the fall. And he goes, well, we're concerned about seasonality and stuff. But he agreed that if we are coexisting with this virus on a low level, if it continues to just percolate along at 20,000 cases a day in the country, that is probably not going to lead to another peak. That'll probably just be a persistence that we have in the environment with occasional spikes, not outbreaks. I know what the press is doing. When they start chanting that there are outbreaks, they want you to think about New York City and Italy. This is not like that. This is not an explosion. These are some small upticks in states that, frankly, already had very, very low levels. And I would encourage you, look at the hospitalization and the death rates in those states where they're making claims about peaks, about outbreaks. They're not changing. All that really counts is the hospitalization rate and the death rate. They are not changing. And several of you mentioned on the Restream chat also the idea of dexamethasone. Dexamethasone is a steroid like prednisone. It's just a little bit different. It has been shown to be very, very significant in improving outcomes now. A big study came out yesterday, and it looks great. Dexamethasone is a no-brainer, and I'm sure it'll be used widely in this. Andrew is also pointing out a new study from Italy showed that nearly 70% of infections were for those under age 60 were asymptomatic. So if you're under 60 and you get infection, you're more likely to be asymptomatic than even symptomatic. That's interesting, unless I presume, unless you're maybe in one of those gene clusters. Maybe that is associated with symptomatology even under age 60. You thought, Keith, you thought corticosteroids were bad for COVID-19. Guess what? Fake news. The dexamethasone studies were well done, and they actually stopped them because it was so good. Now, is there something unique about dexamethasone as say compared to prednisone or other corticosteroids, Solumedrol, something like that? Yeah, it's a little different. And it's a way of suppressing cytokine storm. It is. The interesting thing will be what if they combine it with remdesivir? What if they combine it with IL-6 inhibitors? Things like that. That would be very interesting. I don't know if they're using IL-12 inhibitors or not, but they something to kind of look at if they have that. Okay. Again, this has been very interesting. Let's see. I was in the hospital.
Tell everywhere to find Tyrus and Anahita. AnahitaLaw.com if you need a lawyer. Good
and
lawyer.
Tyrus can see
She's a criminal
Tyrus
defense attorney.
Tyrus and Timpf. Yes, Anahita Law. And
We
also
forgot to let them plug themselves.
And
on
Anahita Seda is the
said
Twitter
bye.
handle. Yeah. Well, it was up there on the screen and stuff. I
Yeah,
figured
that's
people
all right.
would figure
You
that
can find Tyrus at Planet Tyrus on Twitter or Tyrus Mash on Instagram.
And the Greg Gutfeld Show and Tyrus and Timpf podcast. So that's dexamethasone is used for RA. Michael Loveland, dexamethasone is used for all sorts of things. It's used for inflammatory conditions of the vocal cords. It's used for a lot of stuff. It's used for swelling in the brain because it's very powerful. It's a very powerful anti-inflammatory. Let's see. I lost my train of thought here. Where was I going to go? They claimed Illinois would be the next hotspot in May. Now it's one of the lowest. Yeah. The other thing I asked Dr. Murray yesterday, I said, what should our relationship be to your models? No one can predict the future. Is that correct? He said, yes. And I said, look, I behave like your models will predict the future, but I understand because I wait for them and I study them and stuff. But I understand these are just indicators. This is not science. These are models. These are like trying to predict the stock market or weather. It's too complicated. And our sense of this is that there will not be a second peak in the new season. And speaking of Andrew out there on the chat, Andrew, you did not get me into a phase 3 trial yet. I really want to be in a phase 3 trial for a vaccine. I saw there's a phase 1 trial for a different vaccine in Bethesda and Seattle, but I don't want that. I want to get on the RNA virus, the RNA vaccine rather. I like that technology. The spikes lined up with protest gatherings and bars opening. Yeah, Tom, that's pretty much true. And you would expect that. How could that not be the case? Especially when people are resisting wearing masks. I'm a mask maven. I'm a mask advocate. I think it's our chance that we squander if we don't wear the masks. Susan, you're in the corner of my screen now. What's going on there? Looking over my shoulder.
Making faces.
Okay, you want me to go now? Is that the idea? Wrap it up?
Yeah, I have a show tonight.
Yeah, okay, tell them about it.
Oh, okay. Let me find the banner. Let me find it.
Do I think the president or government officials have gotten into the phase 3 trials? It's very interesting. I don't know. Okay, so there it is.
That's my banner.
That's what's coming a little bit later.
Yeah. So, let me put it up without the music.
Something.
Oh, it has to have the music.
Okay. There you go.
I know I had one. I put the music on today. Anyways, I'm doing a show tonight with the beautiful and talented Cindy Keza and Psychic Rebel Colby. We'll be taking your calls, and also we'll have a special guest celebrity on tonight to get a psychic reading. So that'll be at 5:30 p.m., which is in about an hour and a half.
All right. And there was something else I wanted to mention, and now
See who will come into the podcast playroom.
Didn't Duncan Trussell say that, Keith? I'm not sure what Duncan Trussell said. Where can we find your interview with Dr. Murray? Can they find that, Susan? It's a Fox 11 Los Angeles. They have a Facebook page. And
No, they don't have that anymore. So you have to watch the news. I assume maybe there's something out there. If you go to Alex Michelson's Twitter, he may have posted something.
I didn't see it, I must say.
Yeah, he doesn't. You have to watch it live on Fox News.
Oh,
It'll
the
be
liver supplement. That's
in competition with my show tonight, but that's okay. If you want to go watch that, it's okay.
So I was talking about a supplement that is shown some utility. I really kind of like it for alcoholic liver damage, helping protect against alcoholic liver damage. And they are selling it as a hangover product. I'm not so sure that's really what it's all about. But it is called let me get it right. Dihydromycetin, I think is the actual name. Hold on here. Oh, shoot. Yeah. Let me see. I'll look it up for you guys. dihydromycetin. There it is. Dihydromycetin has several different products available. It's also called DHM, dihydromycetin. And I am I'm impressed with the science that's out there on this. It's just a flavonoid, and it's effective. It seems to be effective in some, maybe in alcohol.
Somebody
withdrawal.
said it causes hair loss, which a lot of stuff does. I've lost my hair a lot of times taking
that.
it.
Almost anything can cause hair loss, to be fair. But if you're concerned about liver damage, it's something interesting.
Oh, great. So the stuff you're giving me is going to cause hair loss?
I'm looking.
I just grew my hair back.
Yeah, I'm looking.
Okay, but that's fine. If I'd rather keep my liver.
It's actually seemed more beneficial in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So it's for people that maybe are more obese-related liver disease. But I saw some stuff in alcohol that looked pretty interesting. Anyway, that was it. Something to think about. It's not a replacement for stopping drinking, which would be the more appropriate thing if you're worried about your liver. Let's see. Okay. You guys are saying strange things here on the chat. I'm just wondering.
I know we're all over the place now. People weren't really too happy with that conversation, but we really like to talk about
different things.
Yeah.
We just thought it was important to get into that. That's all.
It was Tyrus's pick.
Tyrus wanted to get into
He's
it.
co-hosting.
I think it's a reasonable topic and something for us to know something about, I think.
You know, the one thing that bothered me was somebody did a video about what it would be like, if there were no cops to pull you over, and which most people that get pulled over are black, but what if there is somebody driving drunk? What are we going to do? They're just going to drive drunk everywhere.
Right.
And how are you going to make them stop if they're belligerently drunk? You're going to, is a social worker going to pull you over and go, hey, how would you like to come with me? So, I mean, it's too dangerous. And school shootings, forget it. What are we going to arm our teachers? Like, how is that going to work? And, it all sounds really good to have more social services, but why can't we have both,
Paulo,
just have better social services in the police department?
Paulo, I talked about the dexamethasone quite a bit here, and we're going to kind of wrap things up here. We appreciate you
Sorry,
joining
I
us.
had to talk about it.
That's all
If
good.
I had kids, they'd be homeschooled. This whole shutdown has taught people that homeschooling might be the way to go. I mean, my boys may not be able to go finish law school, and it's like they might be able to do it from home. That actually is great. So, I mean, I guess people are going to start homeschooling and never work again.
Andrew, send us Dr. Zelenko's information. I'll be happy to talk to him. Susan, get contact@drdrew.com and look for Andrew's note, Susan, on Dr. Zelenko, a good guest for us possibly here.
Okay.
So in any event, looking at
I think I've responded to him. He probably has an email.
The COVID-19 Health Data Project, healthdata.org. I just see things kind of cruising along. I don't see them getting worse. I see a little bit of spikiness from the lack of mask wearing. Arizona has a little problem around that, and it's affecting the death rate too in Arizona. You see a little bit of spikiness, which may actually be more testing, frankly, because a lot more testing going on right now. People that went to the demonstrations are concerned about themselves and are being tested. At the demonstrations, they're actually putting up testing sites, so many people are getting tested that wouldn't otherwise have gotten tested. So we're picking up more cases, so that's responsible for some of the spikiness as well. We've done now a massive experiment, and it turns out that this does not seem to be well transmitted out of doors, which is something we knew already. But I think we can certainly go freely to the beach and the trails and everything else, and that's probably the best place for us right now.
See how it goes.
And transmission is an indoor phenomenon, so be careful, and masks seem to prevent
Well,
that.
they say we're probably going to have 200,000 by October.
Yeah,
makes
that's
sense.
part of the other thing that quietly happened in the University of Washington data is that he
And that there will be a spike
slowly
in the fall.
increased his overall death rate to 200,000. And again,
Except for New York. Only California.
right, which is another thing I asked him. I
That
said,
doesn't make sense.
I said, why is New York, they've done, death rate went to 0 and their case rate is less than half what it is in California. What happened in New York? And he said, they're doing a better job. I don't think so. They're doing the same job. But something about having had that massive explosion, something about that affected the people that now can get infected, it seems. But I don't know. And so he didn't have a good answer for that, and I don't want to.
Check out the special report tonight at 7 p.m. if you don't like psychic mediums.
Yeah, Alex Berenson's going to be on tonight.
Oh, yeah. Somebody's saying to get him back on. So
Alex? Well,
you'll
Alex
get
is
your
gonna-
wish. You
Alex
can
is
watch
gonna
it
be
at
on
Fox
Fox
LA.
11.
I think it's
Because-
not on Facebook.com anymore. It's just foxla.com/live.
So Oregon
change
tripled.
that.
So I'm going to look at Oregon. Somebody did bring up Oregon today, and I did not have a chance to look at that. So let's look at Oregon from a graph standpoint. Well, it tripled from 60 to 180. I mean, you got to be really careful about what the press is telling you. Yes, technically it tripled. It went from 60 to 180. Come on now, or 140. Let's. It's nothing. It's still nothing. And the hospitalization rate. Let's see what that did. This is what the press is doing to you, everybody. If it went from 60 to 6,000, yeah, that's a problem. Hospitalization rate is essentially 0. The death rate, let me see if I can see it. Well, that would be affected later, but that is also 1 per day. 1 per day. Look what they're doing. Oregon has tripled from 60 to 180 cases. Yeah, it tripled. And it'll probably pop back down, by the way, unless it starts to really build. What we're seeing is stuff that ticks up and then ticks back down again. They are able to chase these things down. They're able to check the contacts. They're able to isolate these cases. You can isolate 160 people. You can do it. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. I mean, come on now. I will leave it at that. It's panic porn. That's right. Monica, it is panic porn.
Yeah, leave it at that because I got to prep my next
Team
show.
Armageddon. You have to get ready for your thing.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
We appreciate you
you
coming
love to
around.
do
Yeah,
that.
it's a grim milestone, Senor Nasuno. It's a staggering number and a grim milestone. See you guys later.